After several years of delay, President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into law. Egosa Ingubo reports.
The petroleum industry is the backbone of the Nigerian economy, but for many years, that sector has been challenged by several governance issues. Efforts to fix these problems in the last 20 years have failed. The jinx has now been broken by President Muhammadu Buhari after he signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into law. This is coming into effect 1 month after the bill was passed by the Ninth National Assembly. The main objective is to promote the exploration and exploitation of petroleum resources in Nigeria for the benefit of the Nigerian people and promote sustainable developments. Until its passage, the Petroleum Industry Bill generated controversies over the allocation to host communities, and how the president has signed the bill into law in self-isolation in compliance with public health measures after his return from the UK, where he attended the Global Education Summit. He says this is in fulfillment of his constitutional duty. A more elaborate ceremony has been prepared for Wednesday after the mandatory isolation period for the president. The presidency says it's a victory for the country and a plus for the Buhari administration. It's hoped that the law will provide transparency and accountability in the management of the oil sector. Erusa Igumbo, Arise News.
Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, was on Newsnight to discuss this.
Nobody thought that this day would come. Looking at the history of the Petroleum Industry Bill, it's been around with us for about 20 years. And indeed, the Petroleum Act itself was enacted in 1967, and there hasn't been any substantial change to that law. That means practically, what we did was transforming from a law that is 54-year-old to something new, something that is modern. And coming back to the NNPC, it is very obvious the provisions of the law said clearly that you are going to transform this company into clearly what is called a Kama company. That means a company that will operate under the Company and Allied Matters Act. The meaning of this is that this company will just be another privately owned company in a sense. This company will pay taxes, this company will pay royalties, and this company will deliver dividends to its shareholders. This isn't the situation today because the corporation has no such obligation today. It means that it has stalled its development, its growth, and its prosperity. And what this bill will do now is in the very short term, within the framework of the Petroleum Industry Act, is that within 6 months, a new company will be incorporated. Mm-hmm. That means all liabilities and assets of this company will be transferred to the new company. Not all of them, by the way. The bill is also very clear that some toxic assets of the corporation is carrying today will no longer be with it. The federation or the shareholders can decide to keep some of the assets and leave some within the corporation, and therefore you're going to have a much more efficient, much more slimmer, much more commercial national oil company at par with its peers across the globe. So it's going to be very exciting times for this company, and of course, I believe very strongly that this company will do better under the new scheme. I also believe very, very strongly that there is nothing better that could have happened to this company than what we see today. And we know this is history made. This couldn't have been possible to deliver under any other circumstance except under the current setup that we have.
Right, welcome back from that. Tundu, is it the journey completed, fait accompli, or the journey has just started?
I'd like to think it has just started. I already cannot wait for an amendment which gives us an upward review of that 3% allocation to the host community, which I have a huge problem with, to be frank with you. But, this is a huge feather in the president's cap and will form an unarguable part of his legacy, which I hope is something that's been considered in the seat of power every minute of every day. Yeah. President Buhari is constantly writing his legacy. This is huge. The fact that it's taken 20 years and he was the one who finally delivered this act, warts and all, no matter what the flaws might be, which could always be amended down the line, is kudos to the presidency and kudos to the National Assembly, especially the House of Reps, who wanted 5% for the host communities in comparison to the Senate, who wanted 3% and have won the day. I tend to sort of err on the side of generosity towards the host communities, considering all that they have suffered. And I agreed with those advocating for 10%. So 3% is really far below that. So the act, we're going to be discussing it with a subject matter expert later on in the show when we discuss it with our guests. But I think this is a positive step for Nigeria, especially in terms of just the rot, the lack of political will, the corruption that so frequently holds us back. So this, I hope, is us turning a corner.
Dr. Abati?
Well, I mean, let's put it like this. Better late than never. This is a piece of legislation that has been in the making for 2 decades. I mean, the most protracted legislative process in the history of Nigerian democracy, or if you like, since the return to democratic rule in 1999. And now it has happened that, in the season of President Buhari's administration, the law has finally been passed. But opinion is divided with regard to it, and that's understandable. You recall that, when the National Assembly decided to pass the bill as it then was, it's now an act, PIA 2021. There were issues with regard to the definition of host communities. There were issues with regard to, the amount of profit, the percentage that will go to those host communities, whether it should be 3% or 5%. There were issues about, the percentage, 30% of profit of the multinationals, of the oil and gas companies that will go to the frontier basins. And of course, all of that has not been resolved. So the issue, of course, is that a law evolves. So I assume that there will be opportunity now that there is at least a framework in place in the future for further amendments. And that's why the Buhari administration putting this on the table is a step forward. The second point to note is that the test of any law is in the implementation. There are many parts of that law, as it is now, that will have to be kick-started. And we're told that the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources later today will be addressing the media to give us details. One major concern in the newspapers today is that, look, this particular law makes a provision for market forces to kick in. So what does that mean in real terms? Does it mean that once the law is implemented, Nigerians will now begin to pay close to 300 naira per litre for petroleum products? In other words, market forces will take over. That should be a major source of concern. And what would the government decide to do? Follow the law strictly, or go slowly in the light of other considerations? So these are some of the things that Nigerians will be interested in. But as it is, there are those who have praised it, that the law will add value, it will attract investment, it has provided greater clarity, but there are also those who are saying that, look, the government has not been sensitive enough to the demands, to the concerns of the oil-bearing communities. And that's the position of PANDEF, that's the position of MUSOP, but in any case, we have a law in place now that we can further discuss, and amendments are possible in the future. But are we going to pay more for petrol? Ordinary Nigerians like us are waiting for Timi Presiva, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, to offer us further clarity in that regard later today, as promised.
I mean, great insights, but was it really worth the 20-year wait? That's another question we'll answer in the course of the show today. That's all on the news headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rhodes Sodiri, Michael Wilson, Aaron Akirjala to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rhodes Sodiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rhodes.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Well, we kick off with oil and gas. The big news from yesterday, President Buhari, of course, has signed off on the Petroleum Industry Act, which is supposed to revolutionize, reform the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. Timi Presiva, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, he is due to give a press conference either today at 2 p.m. or tomorrow after tomorrow's Federal Executive Council meeting. Now, he's expected, of course, to talk about, the highlights of the bill, which, by the way, our viewers can read about in today's This Day newspaper, everything you need to know about the Petroleum Industry Act. breaks it down. But he'll talk about the new upstream regulatory commission, the midstream and downstream regulatory commissions. He'll talk about the 30% allocation for frontier exploration. He'll talk about the still touchy subject of the host communities and that 3% derivation from capital expenditure for oil companies from the previous year. And then what is expected, from what I'm hearing, is that the corporatization of the NNPC, the state oil company, and what that means for fuel subsidies going forward is expected to make up the bulk of his speech later today or tomorrow. Now, the thing is, I'm not done reading the act, which is about 250 pages, but just speaking specifically here on what it means for the NNPC to become a for-profit company, I haven't so far seen any specific language that says that fuel subsidies will end. Now, hang on. The thing is, the interpretation of the NNPC becoming a corporate entity, which has to take place 6 months from when the act was signed, which was signed yesterday. So 6 months from now, in the new year, we expect that's the corporatization of the NNPC to take place. Those are two separate issues. So it's supposed to be a for-profit company which cannot be carrying the losses that it's been carrying for years. But who sets the prices when it comes to fuel in this country? It's supposed to be market determined. We'll see. But again, all will be revealed when Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timi Silva, gives that press briefing later today at 2 p.m. or tomorrow after the Federal Executive Council meeting. We move to customs, still on fuel. Very interesting article in the Premium Times. Hamid Ali, who is the Comptroller General for Customs, was quoted as blaming the NNPC for not taking his suggestions from Customs to set up NNPC retail outposts in our border neighboring countries, Ghana, Cameroon, Niger, Benin Republic, and so on. Now, the quote seemed to suggest that he was saying if those retail outlets had been set up, that fuel smuggling would have been curbed. Now, the thing is, from a revenue standpoint from the NNPC, if you set up outposts in other countries, and again, if you travel to Tundu just came back from vacation, for example, in other countries you'll see Total, Shell, retail outlets where you can drive in and purchase downstream products, fuel or whatever, what have you, and you think about whether or not, or rather, what that would mean for the revenue of the NNPC if they were set up in other countries. That's the theoretical outcome of that, in that the NNPC would derive revenue from them, but suggesting that setting up retail outposts in other countries will somehow reduce smuggling, it doesn't really add up, if that Premium Times quote is correct, because where you set up your retail outposts in the jurisdiction of another country would mean that those retail outposts would be subject to the downstream regime of that country. So if you were to set up a retail outpost, an NNPC retail outpost in Accra, and you can drive there and buy fuel, they would have to sell fuel at what the retail prices in Accra, which means that the issue of arbitrage still exists, and that is what is still going to be incentivizing smuggling from here to there. So, I don't know, it seems like everyone keep dancing around this issue of fuel smuggling and pricing. It just has to come with regulating the price, which again, going back to Timi Silva and his speech today, maybe that will be addressed. Maybe he'll give us some clarity on it. We move to debt. Patience Oniha, the Director General of the DMO, Debt Management Office. She gave an interesting summary of a presentation given by Zainab Ahmed, the Minister of Finance and Budget and National Planning. This was at a forum organized by the National Assembly Committee on Finance and Budgets yesterday. They were talking about the medium-term expenditure framework from 2023 through to 2024. And so Zainab Ahmed gave this presentation and essentially said that Nigeria still has to keep borrowing and revenues are falling. And then Patience Oniha came on to summarize it. She was like, hey, look, basically, we're not making enough money and we have to keep borrowing going into the near future. It was kind of somber, but I did enjoy how straight to the point she was. By the way, still on fuel, Zainab Ahmed, again, at this presentation at the National Assembly yesterday, said that fuel subsidies have to end. So there you have it. And then finally to aviation, Hadi Sirika has been talking about how our airports, international airports in Lagos, in Nnamdi Azikiwe in Abuja, in Rivers, they all are not quite up to snuff when it comes to being outfitted properly for international travel. So the federal government, through Ministry of Aviation, has officially started shopping out its request for concessionaires, private entities to come in and, gin up those airports in a partnership with the federal government. So we'll see how that works. You know that there is an existing outstanding court case between the federal government of Nigeria and a concessionaire at MM2. So things like that are what private players will be looking at as to whether or not they want to come in and partner with the government. That's our African business update.
Well, we have just 1 minute with you, so just to ask questions. You're talking about the removal of fuel subsidy and the clarity that we expect from the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources later today. Yesterday we were discussing Alhaji Lamido Sanusi Lamido, what he said about fuel subsidy not being sustainable, and how he said, look, if this had been done like a few years back, the pain would have been lesser, but to do it now, the pain will be greater. Otherwise, it looks like a reasonable thing that we should have done long before now. But this concessioning of airports, what is the situation in Lagos? I thought the Lagos airport, which is included in the list, is already, concession to Bicotny. And the whole issue between Bicotny and government is about the GAT, the General Aviation Terminal, and whether that was part of the concession or not. What's the situation in that regard?
Yeah, so we don't have an update on that yet. That is still ongoing, which is why for the federal government to now go ahead and say they're going to concession the rest of the airports, is that going to be a clog in the wheel for them to be able to get more private entities coming in? So that is still very much out there and still very much has to be resolved.
Well, thank you, Rotes. Moving on now to more business updates. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Morning. So everybody's obviously weighing up what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment. We'll come on to that later on. But mainly the markets are still disregarding that, mainly concerned about the advance of COVID-19 and its various variants. Of course, when taper its quantitative easing, we get the Fed minutes to Asia Pacific stocks. And what we're noticing there is really, particularly amongst stocks which depend upon high-tech itself, Tencent, Alibaba down. Losses came after China seeks to tighten rules on what it describes as unfair internet competition. China's market regulator, the State Administration for Market Regulation, covered a wide area of preference to use because some companies are using data to stamp out criticism, and also there's a lot of fake product reviews as well. They're trying to stamp on that. I'm going to take you down to the crypto markets, worth now $2 trillion. Bitcoin topped $48,000 over the weekend, highest level since May. Facebook prefers to ban any communication from the Taliban. Considers Taliban a terrorist organization. Facebook says it's got a dedicated team of Afghan experts which will try to stop the transmission of Taliban messages. For years, the Taliban obviously has used social media to spread messages around the world. Jeff Bezos is suing NASA he's suing the deal with Elon Musk about moon landing equipment and so on. Apparently, NASA awarded Elon Musk's SpaceX this $2.9 billion contract for moon landing. He says it's unfair. NASA's saying, hang on a second, it was a cheaper price, and Musk's company has got a lot of experience in doing that kind of thing. So that's that. US stock indexes, futures slightly less, records yesterday. Retail sales coming out today, talking about that with Reuters later on. Economists surveyed by the Dow calling for a 0.3% in retail sales after June's reading showed a surprise 0.6% jump. We've been looking at those figures to try to say, and the Fed's going to do, but most people looking at the minutes, which come out tomorrow. As far as the UK is concerned, here's one, a big sort of I suppose, really, for what's happening in the UK Gigafactory, which is going to it's run by a company called British Volt. Now it's got an investment from a company called Glencore, which is one of the major mineral and the mineral companies in the world. It's a £2.6 billion project, and it will help a homegrown market for making electric cars. Here's an important one. Well, he doesn't sound it, but there's a warning today that if you're going to order takeaway food and so on, don't give a lot of your data to the coffee bars and themselves. Customers should think very, very carefully about handing over data and so on. I would add something to that as well. Do not use so-called private public networks in coffee bars if you're making phone and Wi-Fi to the coffee bar Wi-Fi. Do not do that. I was told that a long time ago by a security advisor, because it's not secure and it's giving your information away. Briefly, as far as commodities are concerned, OPEC Plus, quite expectedly, rebuffed Joe Biden's wish to increase oil production, and gold has continued to fight. But again, we're waiting to see what the inflation prospects and what the Fed minutes say before there'll be a proper move on gold. Now, yesterday, Doctor, you wanted to talk about Afghanistan. Shall we talk about that this morning?
Yes. I mean, yesterday I'd asked about what the geopolitical risks are for
indeed.
the markets in that region, and also implications for the U.S. stock market. And what is the future for Afghanistan's economy?
All right, so here is worry is now the United States have left to domestically, number one. So number two, though, it's likely that China, Iran and Russia will occupy that space that the United States did. Afghanistan's a very poor country. The average getting by on the average person gets by on $2 a day. However, there are massive mineral deposits in the country. China is already mining lithium, particularly lithium. That would be a massive thing for. But it's you'd have to ask yourself, no established commodity exchange there. How on earth one would actually manage to trade with Afghanistan and the Taliban? Again, we just don't know the answers to that at the moment. Beijing continue to do so. What does it mean for Joe Biden's reputation at home? Probably. Americans are very insular about the way they see the rest of the world, and they probably quite like the fact that we've taken troops away from the troubled zone and bringing them safely back home on the anniversary of 7/11 and all that, or rather 9/11 and all that. However, it gives a lot of ammunition to countries. If America gets involved at the first sign of trouble, they disappear, and that will add to Russia's proper China war. What about Afghanistan itself? It's very good at its opiate economy. It's very good at exporting war and narcotics, basically. What will happen if foreign aid reverses out of the country and there's nothing left? Make no mistake, if foreign aid goes, the poppy trade will grow. And good message to those people who take to the question. If you don't.
All right. Afghanistan was beginning to have a vibrant, tech sector that was emerging when the Americans were there. So I think it's transitioned beyond just poppy, because I'm always very sad when everybody talks about Afghanistan and they think of the poppy trade.
That's all everybody thinks about.
That's everybody thinks of poppy trade. It's more than that. I mean, they've got a vibrant set of young people doing great things. It's just that things had gone south for them. But I want to talk about Cobhams and Ultra. That deal has gone through. Britain is scared about that deal. They're buying the aerospace company, Cobhams, Ultra, American companies buying it. What does that do for your national security?
Well, it's a worry, certainly. And these deals are being looked at by security officials, by the government security minister, and also by the Prime Minister itself. And at the end of the day, this will come down to this, because still stop these kind of the side. It gets in the way of UK security. Most people market, I think there are certain things that you want to keep to yourself. The story this morning about in this well for batteries underlines the fact that, you know, we're also trying to develop our very own battery business to support our very own electric car production, because we've seen to do. There are too many people out there, it seems at the moment, who can very easily get their claws, get their tentacles into other countries' security and other countries' vital assets.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you for your time.